Namaste, everyone. Welcome. Finally made it. I didn't know if I actually would make it in general, and I didn't know if I would make it to this live stream. So, welcome. Get settled. Grab your popcorn, literally and figuratively. Some water, some tea, some coffee, whatever feels good for you. We are getting into it. My name is Jamie London Wahlberg. I am a leader of love, burnout recovery, and intimacy expert. I am an Usui Holy Fire 3 Reiki Master Teacher. I am a Galactic Channel, a certified sound healer. I am human. And I am one who has had a very big journey with burnout of all types. And today we are going to focus on my medical burnout journey, because in the last 6 months, it has especially been very present in my life. And I want to tell you the real story as much as I can, as much as I can remember. And I'm probably only going to do it once, because let me tell you, it's harder to remember as time goes on, the specifics and how I specifically felt and what was really going on and who was involved. And the truth is, so much has gone on that I can't remember anymore all of the specific details. Partly because of how much pain that I was in, the rest of my symptoms, partly because it takes a village to help someone with my complex case get to where I am. I'm here to tell you that I am not in medical burnout, even though I am currently within my medical journey. So if you are someone who is in a medical journey and you are concerned about medical burnout, or you are currently medical burnout, or you're on your way to medical burnout, or you know someone who has medical burnout or is going through some really big medical crisis and you're concerned about them getting burned out, please watch this. Please tune in. Please save this video. Please share it with them. Because this is not going to be a video, a live stream from someone who is a doctor. This is going to be coming from someone who is a wellness practitioner, as a patient, as a human, as a spirit, who has gone through it and figured out how to get through on the other side. And I know how to help you. And that's why I'm having this. That's why we're doing this right now, is because it all comes down to me understanding that my journey has brought me to a place where I have wisdom that is valuable for those who are here on this earth looking for it. And if I can help one person within my experience and sharing this journey, then that's worth it to me. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for caring. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for being you and for being here. When you receive, we all receive. And one of my ways that I want to give back to you while you are receiving this is I want to let you know that I am flowing Reiki through this session, through this experience, through this video in perpetuity. So if you are watching this now when I'm live, or 5 moments from now, or 10 weeks from now, or 20 years from now, I want you to know that you can receive the Reiki by simply saying, I choose to receive this Reiki for my highest good and for the highest good of all. Now, I know you're busy and you're probably wondering, how long is this going to take? The answer is, I don't know. It's part of why I haven't done this, because it's very much labor intensive for me. And it's something that's very time consuming. And it's taken me a very long time to figure out how to tell this in a way that is concise. Today, I'm a little bit less worried about being concise. Concise is on the agenda. But I'm much more interested in being authentic, in being transparent and vulnerable, in being clear, and getting as real and clinical and emotional and spiritual as I need to in order to really tell the story. So if you're here with me, I thank you for receiving, and I thank you for receiving me as well. I am going to be using my phone notes so that I can stay on track. If you are wanting to know the bare bones of the chronological order of what's gone on and some of what I'm about to get into, I definitely encourage you to read the post or have some app or whatever it is that you want, some sort of technology that's amazing these days, read it to you. So that way you can get a clear understanding of the overview of what it is that I'm going to dive into. And there's a reason that I've kept it very vague and very simple, because none of this is simple. None of this is vague. And it's just enough for you to choose to resonate, listen, be open, and click. So you're here now, and we're going to get into it. So this is my journey with medical burnout, how I got out of medical burnout, and where I am now. So let's start from the beginning. I'm going to quickly itemize milestones in this timeline before I break us down into sections, so that way this feels really digestible and tangible. And if you're here with me, I encourage you live or after the stream even to comment wherever you're watching this, whether it's YouTube, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, whether I've put this somewhere else. Comment and ask your questions. Leave your shares of what this brought up for you. Are you resonating? What are you going through? I would love to support you. That is, in fact, the point of this. And I'm happy to be back and forth with you and engage with you in this. So I'm actually going to have the comments in front of me there so that way I can see them. And we're going to get through it. So let's go through the timeline. So the timeline, right? I can't tell you every little moment of my 37 years. I'm not going to do that. I will tell you, I'm 37. I was born on March 27th, 1989. And the timeline that we're going through starts when I'm about age 4. So about in 92, 93. And we are going to blast off from there. And my goal isn't really to hover tremendously in a lot of the chunk of the time. I really want to get us to the last 6 months, because that's where the real juice is in terms of where I am, what's been going on, and where I'm going. So when I was about 4 years old, I was hospitalized for 10 days with pneumonia, and I almost died in the hospital. It was New York Hospital in New York, New York, where I was born and raised. And at the time, my mom was working there. Not as a doctor. She was in the psychiatric unit. And I felt alone. I felt confused. I felt scared. And largely the memories that I have are of feeling all of those things. And this really quick flash of me being in the hospital and really not remembering much of anyone around, except for I have a very brief memory and awareness that my Nana, Lorna, who was my first caretaker, my parents both worked full time, it's my first caretaker, being there. And I have this very clear memory of getting a bunch of gifts and getting this plastic hospital set that had it was like this white and red box with the cross on it, and it had a stethoscope and something for injections, a fake syringe, and all of these things and Band-Aids, and loving it. And that's really what I remember about that time. But what's incredible about that time is even though my parents were there visiting me when they could, and doctors and nurses were with me all the time, what I took through my life was this confusion, this fear, anxiety, being alone. And it's really important that you understand this when you hear the rest of this story, because my journey was filtered entirely through this. So even in today's life, no matter how much therapy I've gone through, it all comes back to Jamie, age 4, in the hospital with pneumonia. And ultimately, I was just resistant to whatever they were giving me. And eventually they figured out clearly something that worked. So throughout my youth, my health was nothing super serious for a long time. But I was getting sick pretty frequently. My immune system never fully recovered. And at this time, we don't know that I'm autistic. We don't know that I have ADHD. We don't know that I'm transgender. I was assigned female at birth, and I was raised in womanhood until I was in my mid-20s. So all of these are huge factors into how things happened later. Now, an interesting in-between of all of this is that when I was around 16 or 17 years old, something around that time, I nearly paralyzed myself from the neck down. Slipped down the stairs at a friend's house, and I was bedridden for a while as I was healing through this. I cracked 2 ribs, and I fractured another rib, and I had fractured my vertebrae just below that C range where I would have been totally quadriplegic for the rest of my life. As the doctor said, I was very lucky, and I believe that I very much am and was. So things were pretty uneventful outside of being a typical kid who got sick when I got sick. But I did kind of get sick more frequently. I got upper respiratory things. I was getting UTIs frequently, all of these different kind of things that were going on. But at the time seemed really mild and just whatever I was navigating at the time. When I was 21, everything started to change because I was going to SUNY Purchase. This is after I've gone and left culinary school early. And I'm there for a journalism degree and a minor at what the time they called lesbian and gay studies. And I am going into the woods with my friends as we would. It's in Westchester, New York. The campus is partly surrounded by a wooded area. And the students, we would all go and party, hang out, just wander into the nature. And I was a literal Girl Scout growing up, so I knew very well about ticks. I knew what to wear to go into the woods to be safe. And when I tell you that I remember so clearly that I was properly dressed, I really mean it. I was wearing jeans and a long sleeve shirt and a hoodie, and I was wearing long socks, and I was wearing taller shoes. I couldn't have been more prepared. And I was going into the woods to hang out, smoke with my friends, and enjoy. And it was very shocking when I woke up the next day and I was incredibly sick. I felt like I got hit by 10 trucks. This is pre-COVID, but I would say this was on the lines of how I felt at my absolute worst with COVID. The difference was COVID wasn't around and my awareness at that time. We're talking about 2011, 2011, completely clueless. I'm still living as a woman. I'm queer. I'm in school. I'm happy to be in school. I'm going about my life. And I start to observe my body and look all over my body, and I'm realizing that I have all these different symptoms that are going on. I basically assume that I have the flu until I find a very familiar specific mark on the inner thigh. I honestly can't remember which thigh it was. Probably my right thigh, knowing me. But on my inner thigh. And it was a bullseye. Right there, clear as day. And a bullseye is an absolute clear indicator that you have been bitten by a tick and you may, in fact, have Lyme's disease or another illness that this would carry, another parasite. So in this daze, I guess I went onto social media, probably Facebook, if I recall at the time, and I wrote in something. I'm sure that I could go back years and years through the posts and eventually find the initial post where I'm like, oh my God, I feel horrible. I don't know what's going on. I have this bullseye. I don't know what it is. And one of my best friends writes in and he says, you have Lyme's disease. You need to go to the doctor. You got a tick bite. And I said, how do you know? And I learned that sure enough, this person has experienced Lyme's disease, having Lyme's disease. So now being bitten by a tick doesn't automatically mean that you have Lyme's disease, but ticks carry different tick-borne illnesses, and Lyme's disease is one of the most common, especially on the East Coast. They are carried from deer, and at that time, there was such little information known about Lyme's disease compared to what we know today. And luckily, I had a holistic doctor that my family was seeing, and I went to go see her. And it took 3, I believe, different tests of Lyme's disease before finally it came up positive, because Lyme's disease is one of those tricky ones. And spirochetes, which is what ends up living within you, these suckers are smart. And they know how to hide, and they know how to move, and they know how to fool the tests. And so it is very common for Lyme's disease initially to be negative. And at least it was certainly in that time before it finally tested positive. Now, once it did, I was put on a huge quantity of antibiotics. I was given some different IVs and different fluids and nutrients. And at that time, I was raised in a very non-religious household, Eastern European Jews on both sides, in a very predominantly religious Jewish area. And I was not spiritual, really, at that time. I really didn't have any sort of connection here. And what I discovered was that there was more to healing this and addressing this than on a strictly medical level. And there was more than a Western medical level of looking at this. So I proceeded to go through and treating my Lyme disease aggressively. They didn't seem to find any other diseases, thankfully, from the tick. And I spent the next couple of months that I remember really recovering and figuring this out. Now, I went back to school and started to navigate my life, but it took quite a while. I was very sick for a while, and it took quite a long time to navigate this. And at that time, the belief was that you could heal from Lyme's disease just like that. Like you would be treated, and then you would not have Lyme's disease anymore. And now we have a larger understanding of Lyme's disease, and we have now the great debate, which is that there are people and professionals that believe that Lyme's disease does fully get healed and it's gone. And then we have those who believe that it is chronic, that it never actually fully goes away, but it more so, I guess, would go into like a remission. And I fall into the camp of firmly believing that it is a chronic condition, that one can get chronic Lyme. And I believe that I have chronic Lyme disease, and that was the spark of everything else that I'm about to tell you. Now, it's important to know that there are numerous other factors to all of these medical experiences, right? It's not just Lyme's disease. Now, Lyme's disease can cause a lot of comorbidities, co-infections, and that's a lot of what has happened. But there's more here. There's much more here. There's the genetic links, the fact that a lot of people on, especially my mom's side of the family, navigate a lot of these other ailments that I'm going to talk about, or similar ailments. And of course, knowing now that I have autism and ADHD, I'm odd ADHD, it's looking at what is very common to experience with those and how life happens. And these markers either turn on or they don't. And you never really know. But what you do know is what can actually trigger them. And a lot of what triggers them are things like Lyme's disease and, of course, comorbidities and experiences that come from it. And, of course, what I believe is the largest killer of humanity is stress. And stress is, of course, a foundation of burnout, which is really what we are here to talk about. So, do I believe that I got rid of Lyme's disease? Absolutely not. But I did get into enough of a remission that for several years, it was as if nothing happened. I really didn't think anything of it. Once I got better, they tested me. They were like, okay, it's gone. You're better. And I moved on with my life. So grateful. I was in my early 20s. I had my whole life ahead of me. I had fallen super in love. I had started to co-parent a beautiful child. And I was very much at the grind, both professionally and personally. I was living in New York. I was working in real estate because that's my dad's line of business, and I had not really figured out much else yet. And it was early in social media days, and early social media days, I actually really knew a lot about social media. And so I started a small social media consulting business that was really just me consulting largely with people who were of older demographics, who were getting newly introduced to social media. And I was showing them why it was important for their business and helping them get the basics set up. And so I was working. And I don't like to use the word working, but I was working, and I was working hard, and I was working very long hours, and I was going back and forth from Manhattan to New Jersey and back. And I would go home to be fully immersed with my girlfriend at the time and the baby and my whole rest of my life and my social life and my interests. And so, needless to say, I was not balanced. I was actually completely out of balance in my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual body, but I had absolutely no awareness of this. Well, fast forward to being 23, and it is now approaching 2015, I believe. And I'm starting to not feel well. Just little things, the upper respiratory. And then 2015 hits. And I am getting very sick. And ultimately, I am just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And my whole world blows up. other reasons, sure. But my personal life and my professional life completely blew up. And so I end up living back at my parents' place, single, feeling both supported and unsupported, living very much inauthentically in a lot of different ways, not realizing how unauthentically I'm living. And I was then burned out, unknown that I was burned out, and I proceed to be locked in, bedridden, on and off for the next decade and a half. Mostly in New York, some of it in LA, we'll get there. And through this journey, I managed to come to what I refer to as my tri-awakening, where I racked up 11 diagnoses at the time. I was navigating fibromyalgia. I was navigating gastroparesis. Not all of this I knew precisely when I was in New York, but within this time frame. Basically, the majority of my diagnoses was 2015 to 2017 until what we're about to talk the most about, which is these past 6 months. And I was pronounced legally disabled in 2015 and finally getting benefits, I believe, by the time it was 2016. And eventually those benefits were ripped from me, which is almost a different story, but part of the medical burnout, because part of medical burnout is dealing with the ins and outs of going through hospitals and doctor's visits and feeling absolutely terrible all of the time or most of the time, and navigating all of the government structures and other resources in order to get your needs met, so that way you can actually function, pay your rent and eat your food, and ideally get better. And so I ended up getting diagnosed with persistent postural perceptual dizziness once I was in Los Angeles. I have fibromyalgia, asthma, gastroparesis. Did I say that? I probably said that, and I probably will say it several more times. Vasovagal fainting, which I was already diagnosed with, and a whole bunch of other things that showed up. And of course, boom, 2020, I moved to Los Angeles in 2017 because I had maxed out, failed over 60 medications, tried all sorts of different therapies. I was one of the first 300 medical cannabis patients in New York State. Nothing was working. And one of the biggest issues was that I was feeling incredibly dizzy and nauseous all the time and getting these horrendous headaches and migraines, to the point where I had several different types of headaches and migraines. And this is a lot of what was keeping me bedridden, was I could not function. And so as a result of this, the barometric pressure changes that happen seasonally in New York all the time, I wasn't able to hack it. So I was looking for a place to go with new doctors, new perspectives, ability to access more Eastern ideas and methodologies, and also whether that was going to be more stable. And after doing research, believe it or not, Los Angeles is absolutely one of the most stable when it comes to barometric pressure, and of course, known for beautiful weather. Of course, I get there, and it has historic level rainfall. And at the time when I get there, I had just gotten hired to be an overnight crisis counselor, crisis worker at the Trevor Project, which I loved. Shout out to the Trevor Project, incredible organization. And I was hired at the New York office, but I was absolutely not able to stay in New York. And I called them up, so devastated, because I was starting to get better, and then I got totally much worse. And I had already moved in and out of my parents' place several times, trying to see if I could live on my own and get some autonomy for myself. And during that, I ended up coming to my true awareness of my identity and started to transition from female to male, which now I identify as transmasculine and non-binary. Through this journey, I became in touch with my spirituality. I quite literally prayed for the first time sincerely to God. And I said, if I can get out of this bed, I will do whatever it is I need to do to live authentically, to help myself heal and to help others heal. And of course, medically, I was waking up to my medical journey as well. And so that is my tri-awakening. And so I'm in Los Angeles and I'm getting more of these doctors and more of these diagnoses, and I'm studying and getting into the cannabis industry to learn more about cannabis and how to heal myself with plant medicine. And I am learning Tai Chi and Qigong from my physical therapist who was from Hong Kong, and I got trained in Tai Chi and Qigong, and all of these things are coming about where I'm getting all of this awareness of these different modalities, and I have all of these different tools that I'm using, and I'm getting better, but I'm still not getting totally better. Something is missing. The burnout. I didn't understand the burnout. And back to 2020, right? Now it's 2020. COVID's hit. And I get long COVID. And of course, we're all inside. And I am trying to figure out what to do, what is going on. I became an early adopter on Clubhouse. Through my journey on Clubhouse, I met so many of my soul family that I reconnected with, and I started to learn a lot about different spiritual modalities and other perspectives of ways of looking at being sick versus being well, how to actually heal and navigate. I found my Reiki master teacher, Brandy Culver, and I became a Reiki master teacher myself, and so forth. And through this, I started to really reflect on my own behavior in my life and how unbalanced it was and how much I was at the grind. And some of the earliest ways of me seeing this, right? I wanted to be successful like my dad. I wanted to make my dad proud. I wanted to be stable. I thought that I had this whole life that I really, really wanted. And for the longest time, once it was gone, I really still thought that that was the life I wanted. It turned out not to be the life that I wanted or the life that was for me. It was for me for as long as it needed to teach me what it needed to teach me. And I realized that my dad was someone who I felt was really exhibiting burnout. He was skipping lunch. He was doing super long hours. He didn't have healthy boundaries. He would come home pretty much completely exhausted and depleted. And as a kid, it felt like my dad wasn't really present. Even when he was there, it didn't really feel like he was there. And I started to think about all of this and the world. And the world started to talk about burnout. Burnout started to become this big buzzword. And I realized in my research and my sitting with myself that in fact burnout was what had happened to me, that I had had several types of burnout. And I became someone on a mission to learn more about burnout, to figure out what types of burnout there were, to figure out how to heal my burnout, and when getting out of burnout, how to prevent burnout, how to stay out of burnout. And so that was the journey that I was taking. And I started to learn different modalities, and I started to talk to different people, and I started to go into a coaching program, all while going in and out of doctors' offices and navigating my often 10 out of 10 pain, which eventually scaled down to like more like a 7 out of 10 pain and nausea and all these medications. I mean, I really can't emphasize enough how much it was a full-time job. It was a full-time job for me to handle my health. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. And eventually, I had some pretty horrific things happen in Los Angeles. I got COVID again. And I decided that I had to come home. That literally, that was the safest option for me. So I found ways to emergently get me back home to New York. And I moved back home to New York to continue my healing. And once I got through, COVID, I started to bring myself back to my baseline, and I was much better, but there was still something that was missing. I was still healing some aspects of different types of burnout. I wasn't even aware that I was still healing certain types of burnout. And I was looking for the end of the tunnel. When I first got sick and I was bedridden, I was incredibly suicidal. I had no idea how I was going to get through the rest of my life. Not only did I not want to be here, but truly for the longest time, we had no idea what was going on with my health. And it was so serious, I just thought I was going to be taken out. And it turned out that I just needed to be taken to the knees. I needed to hit the lowest of the low in order for me to actually find this clarity around my journey. And that's around when I started to dive into my autism diagnosis. And I was diagnosed in, I want to say, late 2024. And they had offered me to get ADHD tested. And I said, I don't even need ADHD testing. I know I have it. And this created a whole new perspective, a whole new awareness of burnout, and a whole journey of unmasking beyond the truth and authenticity that I was already living. Now, at this point, I had already believed that I figured out the key to getting out of burnout. But I wasn't embodying it to the level that I am embodying it now. And that's what makes the difference. See, when we're burned out, we feel the extremes of unwell. We are exhausted continuously. We are stressed continuously. We are anxious, depressed continuously. We are in pain physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, continuously. We are blowing up our lives personally and professionally. And it doesn't matter what of the 20 plus types of burnout you have, whether it's one or multiple. The answer is the same. When we're burned out, we don't feel well. We're not living a healthy and balanced life. When we are not burned out and we feel well and we're living a healthy and balanced life, we can say that we are beyond burnout. The key to getting out of burnout is to balance the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. The physical body, anything in the meat suit. The mental body, anything of the mind, I think, the processing. The emotional body, anything of the heart, I feel, the emotions. And the spiritual body, your intuition, your higher self, your soul, all of your connection to God, creator, universe, source, Allah, whatever resonates with you, the more. And I knew already in Los Angeles, I had already figured out that there was a journey of being in burnout and healing burnout and balancing burnout and being beyond burnout, manifesting beyond burnout. But I really had not fully mastered what it was that you needed to do in order to actually get out of burnout and balance these parts of your bodies. And what I had discovered was it was about your routine. See, the rest of the day, we all give and we give and we give and some of us give more than others. How often do you give to yourself? Really reflect on that. How often do you give to yourself? So I realized that in order for me to heal myself, I needed to, of course, give to myself. My cup was beyond empty. It was so depleted that the cup basically disintegrated. I needed to rebuild my cup and refill my cup. And so I was looking for, what can I do? And I started to add in all these different tools and these things. But what really was the big light bulb was this huge shift that I had around routine. And I realized that routine was something that we determined as society was a list that was a to-do list of things that you had to get done to function. That's it. And I realized that that's not what a routine is. What serves us best is a routine is actually a sequence of actions and activities that you truly love, that fill your cup and help you to balance the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. I had caught on to this in Los Angeles and started to build routines for myself. But it wasn't really until I got to New York when I felt that I really mastered this. Because when I got COVID that next time, it was not like when I had COVID last time. I got up again. I got up faster. I healed faster. I handled it better. And instead of feeling like I was completely burned out and shut down for a long period of time, my burnout was significantly shorter. Now, we've been here talking for a while, and we haven't exactly spoken to the specificness, the specificity of what medical burnout is. Medical burnout is when you are navigating likely chronic medical challenges, or you have a terminal diagnosis, or you have some sort of physical medical related accident that requires a long-term treatment and healing, and you find yourself completely out of balance and depleted from that. So medical burnout became a really huge burnout for me. And it was something that I was getting and coming out of and getting and coming out of, because I would start to kind of get to a baseline, and then I would get worse. And then I would get to a better baseline, and then I would get sick again. And then I would get a better baseline, and then I would get sick again. So it was just this constant flow. And it really just became a big point of me having a routine, which my routine is 2 hours in the rising, 2 hours in the evening. It's different in the evening from the rising, all to support, nourish, balance, recalibrate my nervous system and my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. It's something that I can keep up with and do because I love everything that's in it. And it's made it possible for me to get out of burnout and be beyond burnout. I'm at a point where burnout is something that I do not fear all the time, because I have a system now of how to prevent burnout. And I know that if I got into burnout, it would be for a significantly shorter time, and that I have exactly the awareness and wisdom and knowledge that I need to in order to get out of burnout. So, without derailing into all the different types of burnout that I had, just trust that I had, right? That relationship burnout for sure. I had neurodivergent burnout, the identity burnout. I had so many different types of burnout, truly. And that's a discussion for another day. But this is really talking about my medical burnout journey and how I got out of medical burnout and what it is that's going on and been going on the last 6 months, and where I'm at and where I'm headed. So now that you know what burnout is, you know what medical burnout is, and you know enough about my journey to this point, I want to fast forward. And I want to fast forward to December 2025. December 1st, 2025, I moved to Forest Hills with one of my best friends and collaborators, and I couldn't have been more excited. It's in the apartment that I'm in now, and I love it. It's a great apartment. It's great space. It's a huge quality of life change, and it's really been life altering for me in a beautiful way. And we got here. We had quite a few challenges unexpectedly with the apartment and also just moving in general, right? It's stressful, it's overwhelming, it's a lot. And we get to the middle of December and I get extremely sick. First, I get extremely sick with some sort of flu like kind of thing. I mean, it technically wasn't, I guess, the flu, but I just felt awful. I clearly had some major infection and I was a mess. And I was really feeling kind of not as bad as I, once was, but really, really rough. The roughest that I had felt in years. And I was freaking out. I was freaking out because even though I have all of these tools and all of this awareness now, I couldn't believe that I had finally brought myself to this baseline where my pain was significantly lower, where I hadn't been bedridden in a long time. I was at a space where I felt much more balanced physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and more supported than ever before. And I started to get all that clarity, right, from my new diagnoses with autism and my awareness of ADHD and my self diagnosis. And as I continued to unmask, I kept changing and shifting my routine to meet my needs. So I was really surprised that I was just so unwell. But I reminded myself that I've been here before and that this was different because this time I did have the awareness, I did have the wisdom, I did have the tools, I did have the support, and there was a way to get more support. But I kept getting sicker and I kept getting more and more symptoms. And so now I really want to talk about, these last 6 months. And I want to talk about first what baseline looked like, right? Because you already know what burnout means and what it looks like, right? I was bedridden, I was suicidal, I was living inauthentically, I was in 10 out of 10 pain, I was completely miserable, felt isolated and alone, scared and confused. Remember, I told you it would all come back from when I was 4 in the hospital. And so when I got to baseline, my baseline was feeling like out of burnout, was feeling like I was integrating more into the world, getting back to my profession that I love. I was starting to get more into coaching. I was able to go to physical therapy. I was really strong on my diet. I had already shifted by that point to a predominantly plant-based pescatarian diet and gluten-free diet. And for all intents and purposes, I was nailing it. I was doing an incredible routine that was starting to really help me. And I felt like, okay, I can finally make commitments. I can finally move forward. But then I got super sick again. And it was devastating for me because I moved to this apartment thinking and fully believing that I had this whole new life that I was creating. I had all of these ideas and all of these dreams. And yet I felt like I was back at the beginning. But I knew that I wasn't because things didn't feel as bad because I knew that I was going to get through it. Things didn't feel as bad because I had my routine. Things didn't feel as bad because I understood and understood and overstood what burnout was, how to get out of burnout, and I proceeded to take the steps to do this. And as I started to go within this journey, I started to take a look at all of my symptoms and start to address them and make appointments with various specialists to navigate this. At the time, initially, it was all of these sort of cold flu-like symptoms. And then it started to roll into all of these different bladder infections. So I had UTIs, yeast infections, PV, all of this all at the same time rolling through. And I was like, how is this possible that I am navigating all of these symptoms right now? What does this have to do with everything else that I'm navigating? And so I started to go, to my PCP, and I started to go find a new urology specialist, and I started to find a new GI specialist, and I started to get a rheumatology specialist again. And the list goes on. Now, of course, everyone knows, right? When you make appointments for these specialists, you don't just typically get in the next day, right? It takes time to get in, which means that me, Jamie, my biggest advocate at all times, had to really step up and go back to being a detective. See, what I left out from the earlier days is that a lot of what was going on with me at the very beginning was confusing. But as I started to enter into my tri-awakening and I started to really hone in on my intuition and my psychic gifts and my abilities, and I started to really deepen my intimacy with my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, I became significantly more in touch with what my body needed, what was happening, and what I felt was going on, even if it was something that I felt like I knew nothing about. So I had determined that I had atrophy of the urethra, and that what was happening was that my bladder was spasming. It wasn't emptying enough. And when it wasn't emptying enough, especially when I was having these different infections, I would have this urgency to urinate, but then I would still have urine that was floating within the urethra. Well, when you have urine still floating within the urethra and it's not all leaving, that means that you have bacteria that's hanging out in the urethra that would typically be flushed out when you urinate, and it just hangs out and causes all sorts of problems. Well, my friend had convinced me to watch Euphoria, and, minor spoiler for those who haven't seen it, but it's been a couple of years since this episode already, I believe. There's an episode where the main character goes through a kidney infection, and she is explaining how the kidney and the bladder functions. And I literally yelled, "Pause the show!" And my friend's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Just don't talk to me right now." And I'm talking out loud and in my head, and I'm thinking it through, because I had this epiphany. And I realize that there is something going on with my urethra where these infections are happening continuously. And I start to realize that, like how I once had vaginal atrophy, I started to theorize that I could have urethral atrophy. So I started to do some really quick research, and sure enough, I find out that you can have atrophy of the urethra. For anyone with two X chromosomes who has had a womb and a cervix, who has had a vagina, you are someone who at some point go through menopause and experience potentially a weakening of the bladder and the urethra. And part of this is because of the urethra atrophy. Well, my theory enhanced. My theory enhanced to me perceiving, I bet that not only is this common for those more so who have all of these other issues like Lyme's disease and autism and ADHD, but that in fact being transgender and being medicalized in my transition and choosing testosterone for as long as I have in my transition, that would actually speed up, as well as the fact that I had a hysterectomy with a single oophorectomy. So I have one ovary that's happy floating around in there on my right side. And so my theory was that this sped up the process, because when you go through testosterone and you have your hysterectomy, you go through male puberty and you go through female menopause all at the same time. And I started to research, is this something that could be more common and sped up with transmasculine individuals who are using testosterone, this, that, and the other? And of course, I find yes. And I find that this is, of course, hardly researched, and I am not surprised. And it meant that I was going to need to advocate that much harder. And I needed to find people who would believe me. So the first thing was that I went to my mom, who is a capital one skeptic and very medically proficient. And I said, this is my theory of what I believe is going on. What do you think? And she said, yeah, I think that makes sense. I said, great. And so I proceeded to go through waiting for these doctors. Well, at a certain point, I really couldn't wait. I ended up having to go to the emergency room because I was concerned that another cyst ruptured in my ovary. Oh, I forgot about that. When I was 14, a cyst ruptured in my ovary, and I ended up being rushed to the hospital. Of course, I'm okay now, and the ovary ended up being okay, but it was extremely painful. Highly do not recommend. And so I was concerned that this was happening because I was especially having this incredibly acute pain on my right side, on my lower right abdomen. And we kept treating these infections, but they kept coming back. And I go to the hospital, to the ER, and one of the things that they do is a CAT scan with contrast and without contrast, IV. And they bring back the report, and the doctor comes to tell me what's going on. And I'm expecting that he's going to tell me I have a raging UTI and that, they're going to medicate me and I was just resistant to antibiotics. And instead, they say, you have these infections, but also you have inflammation in the terminal ileum. You have a thickening of the wall of the terminal ileum. And I was like, what is that? I had no idea what the terminal ileum is. Well, the terminal ileum is a very important part of the body that every human has, unless you get it removed. And it is this small tube that is running right off at the right side of your abdomen, off of the small bowel. And this tube is very important because it helps to process and digest through nutrients and actually bring them throughout the body, which means that it also helps with strengthening your immune system. And it is actually the organ in your body that is majorly responsible for breaking down of B12, which also, if you don't have enough of or is not being processed properly, can also impact your immune system. So I started to study up on the terminal ileum, and I realized that this is a complete narrative. That my theory became that the terminal ileum was inflamed, so it was not actually digesting enough nutrients, because I had also dropped a bunch of weight again, which is very common. With gastroparesis, I dropped 40 pounds. In this case, I dropped, I think, 7 or 8 pounds initially. And it makes it very difficult to gain weight because you are not properly able to digest the nutrients. So my theory became that I wasn't properly digesting the nutrients, my immune system wasn't very strong, making it very easy for me to get infections, making it very easy for me to have a buildup of different things in my urine coming through an atrophied urethra, meaning that there was even more bacteria that was hovering. And this is why I was having frequent urination and burning and abdominal pain. And I ended up with a fever and all of these things that I typically don't get. And of course, I was completely drained, but I was really blown away that this is what I figured out was going on. And at this point, it was pretty much impossible for me to be convinced outside of this unless I was proven with testing. So, of course, I went the medical route on the Western side, right? I used my Eastern modalities of Reiki. I used good nutrition and tightened up my diet and, you know, took whatever I needed in order to help with these bacterial infections. But I was looking for a bigger answer. So I started to go to these different doctors. And eventually my GI does, you know, an endoscopy, colonoscopy, and discovers that I have Crohn's disease. I have just very recently been diagnosed with mild Crohn's disease. And just before this, the urologist says, yes, you have atrophy of your urethra. And he confirmed what I was saying about the urethra and the bladder and started to treat me with an estradiol cream, which is a very, very tiny 0.01% estradiol cream. You put a tiny pea-sized amount localized right on my urethra a couple times a week. Initially, I was doing it basically every day, and I've been kind of scaling it down in order to help with that area. I was also at my worst pain using some lidocaine gels, and I had a candida overgrowth that ended up happening. So I am actually on Vivjoa, which is a brand new medication that is a 4-month protocol. Huge protocol. And that is a protocol that is a powerful new antifungal. That was not fun trying to get that. And I went to my GI and I said, okay, well, this is what's going on with the urethra and everything. Do you think that this could be exacerbating it? And, you know, we all just came to kind of an agreement that it just made a lot of sense that these were feeding into each other, also because of the types of nerves in the body within that area of the gut and the terminal ileum and the bladder are evidently the same. And so it's mind-blowing to really find out how the physical body and the system works. The Crohn's disease diagnosis, thankfully, is very mild. And I was so relieved to get this diagnosis and also so overwhelmed. Why? Because Crohn's disease is something that I considered a long time ago. When I was diagnosed with gastroparesis in 2017, one of the things that we were looking at was Crohn's disease. And it just wasn't showing up. And I didn't actually get a colonoscopy at the time. I did get an endoscopy, but they didn't feel that I needed the colonoscopy because they figured out the gastroparesis, and I have a 4-hour delay. For those who don't know, gastroparesis just basically means that your digestive tract doesn't function like the average person, and so you have a delay in how you digest. And so that impacts everything, of course. And so really all of these issues were feeding into each other. And it was so validating, so confirming, like I said, very overwhelming. But now I knew that I had a direction and I knew how to go about treatment. And so just making sure that I'm following my my plan here for all of you in this talk. You know, now I've come to this point of treatment. I actually went to my GI today to create that treatment plan for myself. And that was what led me to feel like I was really ready to put this out here, to do this live stream and to really dive in to my medical burnout journey, because I want people to understand that these things are happening, that the urethra atrophy is happening, that the Crohn's disease is happening, that these things can overlap, that people who are transitioning medically, there are so many things that we don't know because they're not properly studied. And it can also speed up different health issues and things that are happening. And that ultimately my resilience, my determination, my not giving up, and my ability to seek out resources and information is what has brought me to this point. If I had given up back when I was initially bedridden, I would have just given up, and that would have been my life. But I don't identify with medical burnout now because I don't feel burned out. Sure, I feel frustrated. Sure, I feel tired sometimes. Sure, I feel depressed some days. But burnout is not about occasionally feeling something or having a day or even a week or even a month of strong feelings. It's consistent over time to the extreme. And I'm no longer in that space. Now, how have I felt the last 6 months? Well, I've been pretty tired. It's been very exhausting. And understandably, both symptomatically, exhaustion is part of fatigue, is part of the symptoms. And just the matter of fact of going in and out of doctor's offices and really not having much time for anything else. I've really had to take a step back from a lot of my professional aspirations and endeavors the last 6 months so that I could really focus and commit to my health, because this year and all of this happening really made me recommit to my health even deeper and more authentically than ever before. If you do not have your health, you really have nothing. It doesn't matter how old you are, you're not invisible. It matters that you live a healthy and balanced life. And when you balance the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, only then can you really be sure that you are not going to end up with medical burnout or some other form. And the body tracks everything. It's been emotionally, mentally exhausting. Spiritually, I feel at peace, even though sometimes it's frustrating, because I know that this is my journey, this is my path. And every single time that I deal with health journey stuff, I have so much new wisdom to support other people. I'm able to be my best me for others. It's how, quite a while ago now, I guess, I determined that really what my professional title is burnout recovery and intimacy expert, because I really do understand and overstand the key to getting out of burnout and to preventing burnout. And I live it, I embody it, and I know how to help people through this. And I do help people through this. Now, at this point, I have these diagnoses. I'm not needing the lidocaine anymore. I'm using less of the estradiol. Of course, as you might imagine, during all of this, I couldn't do very much. I didn't get to socialize really. Sexual intimacy was pretty much completely down the toilet. And that meant that I felt really isolated and very alone, especially because I have every love language and touch is one of my big love languages. And it became just a nightmare resurfacing all over again, but different. And I knew that I was going to come to the end of this tunnel because it was a different tunnel. And I am on a different train. And the track feels shorter. And, 6 months is a long time. And at the same time, it's not remotely the decade and a half that I had navigated before. And I know and believe and trust that I will get back to baseline because the estradiol cream is working well. I do have the lidocaine gel if I need it. And now I have a really great plan with my GI and with my rheumatologist. My GI has got me a prescription of what's called icosapine. Icosapine is a sublingual that is known to help with the stomach cramping. And so, some I think have used it for the bladder, but I am going to be using it for stomach cramping. Of course, by the time I got it, the stomach cramping is gone. It's not something that's happening all the time. It may be from a food trigger, or it may be because I'm not in a flare-up right now. I brought myself really, really quickly into a remission. Like when I tell you quickly, I just did a couple of weeks ago a pill cam study where I literally swallowed, and I mean this, I swallowed a camera the size of a big pill in my body that took video for 12 hours And then my doctor analyzed it, and they couldn't even find any Crohn's disease. So they determined that it was very mild Crohn's disease. That's how rapidly I heal. That's how powerful Reiki is. That's how powerful I am. That's how powerful it is to have a routine. That's how powerful it is to advocate for yourself, to be supported, to anchor yourself in living a healthy and balanced life. Being healthy and balanced does not mean that you're healthy and balanced all the time. It means that this is something that you stick with, that you commit to, that you predominantly are engaging with. Because, of course, change is inevitable. Change is promised. Change is all the time. And I'm someone that navigates change a lot. And so when you navigate change a lot, you have a lot of different changes that happen that your body's addressing and aligning with and acclimating to. So that is something that I now have in case the cramping comes back. The next step is that my rheumatologist right now is fighting for another sublingual, which is a new formulation of a drug called Flexeril. And Flexeril is something that people may use for their bladder. And it's also something that's now used recently for fibromyalgia, but now there is a new formulation in sublingual. And sublingual is important because, again, I have that 4-hour delay with my gastroparesis. So basically why I've probably failed all of these pills is they don't work for me because they don't get absorbed properly. And I get all the side effects because it doesn't absorb properly and fast enough. So sublingual is really bypassing a lot of that stuff the same way that topical bypasses a lot of that stuff. And so it works much faster. So the Flexeril is going to be used to help me with fibromyalgia pain, is going to help me with most likely the bladder, and hopefully is going to also help with the cramping as well, to where I wouldn't even need the icosapine if I were to get cramping, or just won't get cramping at all. So right now, they're fighting insurance for this. In the meantime, my GI has just put in for a new medication, which is called mirtazapine. It's commonly known as Remeron. And I'm going to be taking a half dose at first of the 7.5 milligram tablet at night because the side effect of it is that it makes you sleepy. But this is a powerful medication that actually goes to the neurological nausea center because right now my number one symptom that I'm dealing with that's driving me up a wall is my nausea. And it allows for over time for the nausea to decrease and peter out. And the idea is that hopefully I won't need to be on this forever or long term. It's something that can be taken off, taken on. There's no awareness that they have or studies that taking it for a long time would cause any harm. So that's great to know as well. And I, of course, wonder whether this will also help with my cramping. Maybe, maybe not. But again, I'm not really having the cramping right now. So that's not the biggest issue. And it will not conflict with the Flexeril. The only concern is that when you take a medication, you want to make sure that you know whether medication works or not. So I'm probably going to wait to take the Flexeril, which is fine because I don't currently have it, to make sure that I know what is, in fact, working and not. And the other issue is because the Flexeril also, like I said, can make you sleepy. So these are both medications I would be taking at night. And I need to make sure that I, yes, of course, get a good night's sleep, but that I'm also waking up and functional. Because right now, my sleep has been really erratic, not only because of the change of seasons, but also because I am waking up to pee at least 1 to 2 times in the middle of the night. And it's really annoying. So my sleep is getting interrupted, and therefore I'm not getting as consistent, strong, steady sleep. So I'm looking forward to that as well. The other thing, of course, that I have been doing is diet. So the other step is I'm waiting for a call back from the nutritionist clinic at Mount Sinai called iNourish. They specialize in Crohn's disease, and they have a sister clinic that focuses on the overlap with gastroparesis. And the goal is to work with a nutritionist to figure out how to make a super smart, sustainable dietary plan for me. Now, luckily, as I said, I was already predominantly plant-based pescatarian, gluten-free, which helped a lot. But I needed to get even stricter. Throughout all of this last 6 months, I stopped drinking caffeine pretty much entirely. Once in a blue moon, I'll have, a matcha tea, um, or, one single espresso, but super, super, super rarely now. And otherwise, I drink decaf tea and predominantly water. And I'm getting really into juices because one of the things with Crohn's disease is having things blended is super helpful. And I'm tightening up on my diet. I have shrunk down to very little sugar in comparison to what I was doing. I am eating very basic, lots of bananas, toast, protein shakes. I have started to do a vegan gluten-free mass gainer. So that way I am able to start to get my weight up. And I am also already well enough now that I have started to get more active. So I'm going and doing more social things. I am, did a yoga class. I've started doing somatic dance healing every week. And so I really am already turning a big corner and coming into all of my resources. And again, I have also my routine. So I feel now like I have a really comprehensive plan, and a plan that I firmly believe in is going to work. I dropped off a stool sample today that they're going to check some levels to determine whether it makes sense as well for me to go on a short-term dose of, it would be a short course of a topical steroid, which, pardon me, I'm blanking on the name, Anticort. And the goal of that is to put it on the skin, bypass everything, and help with the inflammation. But right now, we're not even going to go there unless we have proof of it. At this point, I am doing everything that I possibly can. I have started to get back into my professional life slowly but surely. I am writing my first big book on burnout. I am having more socialization. I am back to allowing all forms of intimacy in my life. And I'm actually really remembering who joyful Jamie is, who fun Jamie is, in a way that is so healing and so profound and so huge. And that's what's beyond burnout. Beyond burnout is a life where you live happy and healthy and balanced, where you're authentically yourself, where you're living a life that is sustainable for you, and you're able to enjoy it. You're able to live your purpose, to feel fulfilled, to have your basic needs met. And it's a journey. Right now, I'm not fully better. I'm not as better as I would like to be, and I know that I will get better. The fact that I even know that I will get there and that I have a plan and a course of action and something that I know that works means that I have so much hope and optimism for what my future holds. And I have the same exact hope and optimism for you. If you are in your medical journey, if you are feeling burned out, reach out to me, comment, DM me, email me. I want to know how you're doing. I want to support you. I have programs, I have sessions, I have services, I have great numbers of contacts and resources. No matter where you are in the world, I am here 100%, as I am here for myself 200%. And that's what I encourage you to be. Be there for yourself 200%. Give yourself what it is you need. Create a routine for yourself that you love, that's sustainable. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is that fits, that you can do consistently, so that way you can feel your best self. It takes time, it takes dedication, it takes a village, but you can and you will get there. So I want to say thank you so much to those of you who tuned in, for those of you who watched this entire video or listened to this entire video, to those of you who are reading my book in the future, for those of you who are receiving the Reiki that has been flowing through this session. It means so much to me because I have so much more peace in my life, knowing that all of this was for something of value. It has completely transformed me into my highest and best self, and I am improving all the time. I'm expanding all the time. I'm unconditionally loving. I'm a leader of love. I love how I serve and what I do. I love who I be and who I am. And I am on my way. And you are on your way too. If any of this resonated for you, or you found this informative or helpful or interesting, reach out to me, drop a comment below. Please share this with someone who needs this. Know that I am fully committed. And my larger goal of the Wake and Wellness Centers around the world, accessible for generations to heal, to get out of burnout, and to live beyond burnout, to create a life they love beyond burnout. I am here 1000%. I am committed. I love you unconditionally, and I thank you. Namaste. Be well.